He thought she was finished. He thought throwing her away would make him a king. But the same woman he once mocked for being poor walked into his wedding like royalty, dripping in gold and power. This is the story of Amara, the woman who turned heartbreak into empire. So grab your popcorn, sit back, and get ready for one of the most powerful stories you've ever heard. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button, turn on the notification bell to support more inspiring stories like this one. Her story was spreading from market women to city elites. Yet she remained humble, always remembering where she came from. Because, my children, the palm tree that grows tall does not forget the soil that fed its roots. Amara was rising, but fate still had more surprises for her, one that would test her heart and show her the true power of destiny. Once upon a time, in the lively heart of Anugu city, there lived a young woman named Amara. She was 28 years old, with warm brown skin, bright eyes, and a spirit that refused to bend. Amara worked as a tailor's assistant, spending her days behind a sewing machine, creating clothes for other people's joy while dreaming of a better tomorrow for herself. She wasn't rich, but she was proud of her honesty, her hard work, and her heart. Every morning before the first cock crowed, she would sweep her small compound, boil water for tea, and whisper a prayer before walking to the tailor's shop. Life was not easy, but she believed that patience was the ladder to success. Her husband, Emma, was the opposite of her in every way. He was tall, handsome, and loud. His laughter could fill a room, and his confidence made people stare. He liked fine clothes, big cars, and expensive perfume. When he walked down the street, he wanted everyone to know his name. At first, Amara thought this was charm. She believed his ambition would carry them far. A man who dreams big will one day make us both proud, she often told her sister, try near. But life, my children, does not always follow the songs we sing. As days turned into months, Amara began to notice that Emma's love was not built on truth but on vanity. He valued appearances more than character, money more than peace. Still, Amara gave him her all. She cooked his favorite meals, supported his small business, and prayed for his growth. But Emma wanted more than prayers. He wanted a woman who would make him look like a king among men, not one who came home tired from the tailor's shop with thread-stained fingers. Amara's friends warned her. This man loves the world more than he loves you, they whispered. But she smiled and said, I chose him, and I will stand by him. Love blinded her eyes, and hope silenced her doubts. But fate was watching, waiting to show her that even a woman who bends for love can rise again when pushed too far. That was how Amara's story began, not with riches or fame, but with a heart that believed deeply, and a love that was not returned. My children, when two hearts do not beat to the same drum, even the sweetest marriage turns bitter like unripe cola. That was how Amara's once loving home began to fall apart. At first, Emma's words were soft as honey. He called her my queen, told her she was his blessing from heaven, and showered her with promises of forever. But promises, my children, are easy to speak when the heart is full of pride. As the days passed, the music in their home began to change. Emma started to come home late, smelling of expensive perfume that Amara did not own. When she asked, my husband, where have you been? He would frown and snap, stop acting like my mother. One evening, after a long day at the tailor's shop, Amara came home carrying a small basket of fresh tomatoes. Her hands were tired, her back ached, but her heart was light. She smiled as she greeted her husband. Welcome, my husband. I bought your favorite vegetables. Tonight, I'll make the stew you love. But Emma didn't smile back. He looked at her from head to toe, his eyes cold. Then, with a cruel laugh, he said, Amara, look at you. Always looking like a village woman. You work and work, yet you still have nothing to show. Do you think stew is what I want? Do you think love is enough for me? The words pierced her heart. Emma, she whispered, what do you mean? We agreed to build together. I may not have riches, but I give you all my love. He slammed his phone on the table. Love. Can love buy a car? Can love make my friends respect me? Look around, Amara. My mates are marrying women who wear gold and drive jeeps. And look at you, still sewing for pennies, still dressing like a servant." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "I thought you loved me for who I am," she said softly. Emma's voice grew sharper. "I'm tired of this life. I need a woman who matches my level, not one who drags me down." That night, the walls of their home held silence instead of laughter. Amara lay awake, tears soaking her pillow, wondering where she went wrong. The next morning, before the sun rose, Emma spoke words that shattered her world. "I want a divorce, Amara. I've already spoken to my lawyer." "Pack your things and go." Her body froze. "Divorce," she repeated weakly. "After everything. After all the years." But Emma turned away, his heart colder than harmattan wind. "Yes. I don't want you anymore." Amara fell to her knees, her voice breaking. "Please, Emma, don't do this. I have nowhere else to go. I gave you everything." But he only shrugged. "That's your problem, not mine. The sooner you leave, the better." That day, as she walked out of his house with her small bag and broken dreams, the neighbors whispered. Some pitied her, others mocked. But none of them knew that destiny had just planted a seed in her pain, a seed that would one day grow into glory. Because, my children, when a good woman is cast aside, the earth itself will one day rise to honor her. My children, life has a way of testing the heart of the humble. When the storm of disgrace comes, the weak hide, but the strong endure it and grow wiser. After the divorce, Amara moved into her sister Chineer's small flat at the edge of Anugu. The place was modest, a single room with cracked walls and a thin mattress, but it was filled with love. Chineer welcomed her with open arms, saying, "Do not cry, my sister. God sees your pain. The one who mocks you today will bow tomorrow." But Amara could not stop crying. She had given her whole life to a man who treated her like a stranger. Days passed, yet his cruel words echoed in her mind. "You are poor. You are boring. You are a burden." For weeks, she stayed indoors, afraid to face the world. She could not bear the gossiping eyes of neighbors or the pitying whispers of friends. But hunger, my children, does not respect sorrow. One morning, Amara had no choice but to go to the market to buy food. The sun was fierce that day, beating down on the dusty road. She tied her old wrapper tightly and carried her basket, promising herself she would go quickly and return before anyone noticed her. But fate, mischievous as always, had other plans. As Amara entered the market square, her eyes fell on a shiny black SUV parked near the fruit sellers. And beside it stood Emma, her ex-husband. His laughter rang through the air like a drumbeat. But he was not alone. On his arm was a tall, flashy woman, Chinua, dressed in a sparkling gown that caught the sunlight. Her wig bounced as she laughed, and her gold purse glistened. Amara froze. Her heart pounded like a talking drum. She turned to leave, but Emma's sharp eyes found her. A smirk curved his lips. "Well, well," he said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Look who we have here, my ex-wife, Amara the tailor." Still carrying her basket like a village woman, the people nearby stopped to watch. Some murmured, others chuckled. Chim turned to Emma, her painted lips curling into a smirk. "So, this is the woman you told me about? The one who couldn't keep up?" Emma laughed cruelly. "Yes, my dear. This is her. The one who thought love without money could build a marriage." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Amara's cheeks burned with shame. She held her basket tightly, blinking back tears. "Emma," she said quietly, "is this necessary? You've already left me. Must you mock me too?" But Emma only shrugged. "You mocked yourself. You refused to shine, and now look at you, a shadow of the woman I used to know." Chin tossed her hair and said, "Let's go, baby. She's not worth your time." But Emma wasn't done. He leaned close and whispered, "Do you see her? That's what a real woman looks like. You could never give me this life, Amara." The words cut deep, but Amara stood tall. Her voice trembled, yet it carried strength. A real man, she said softly, does not insult the woman he once called his wife. You may laugh today, but remember, life is not finished yet. The crowd went silent for a moment. Emma's face twisted in anger, but he turned away, muttering, "We'll see about that." Then, with a wave of his car key, he entered the SUV with Chin and sped off, leaving a trail of dust and humiliation behind. Amara stood alone in the middle of the market, her basket shaking in her hands. She wanted to disappear, but she refused to cry there. She walked slowly to the tomato seller, who shook her head in pity. "My daughter," the woman said, "those who mock others today may beg them tomorrow. Take heart." When Amara got home, she fell into Chinier's arms and wept. "They laughed at me," she whispered. "He called me nothing." Chinier wiped her tears. "Let them laugh. The same mouth that mocks will one day praise. You will rise again." And though Amara's heart still bled, a small flame of determination began to burn inside her. For even in her pain, she whispered to herself, "They called me nothing, but one day, they will see the woman I truly am. My children, the river that looks quiet on the surface often hides strong currents beneath." Such was Amara's life after her humiliation in the market. Outwardly, she seemed broken, but deep inside, something powerful was stirring the hunger to rise again. Days turned to weeks. Amara continued working at the small tailor's shop where she had learned her craft years ago. The shop was tiny, just two wooden tables, one old sewing machine, and a roof that leaked whenever the rain came. But it was all she had, and she poured her heart into it. Every morning, she would whisper a prayer, "God, turn my pain into power. Give me one chance to prove that I am not useless." One hot afternoon, as the market bustled with buyers and sellers shouting over one another, a sleek black car stopped in front of Amara's shop. The car door opened, and a well-dressed woman stepped out. She wore a royal blue wrapper with golden edges, and her hair carried the confidence of someone used to respect. The market women whispered among themselves. "That's Madame Kemi," one of them said, "the owner of the biggest fashion brand in Anugu." Amara's heart raced. She had only heard of Madame Kemi in passing, a woman who had built an empire from nothing, known for her eye for talent. What could she possibly want here? Madame Kemi walked in gracefully and looked around the small shop. "Who made this dress?" she asked, pointing to a gown hanging by the window. Amara stepped forward nervously. "Ma, I did." Madame Kemi's eyes softened. "You made this with your hands?" "Yes, Ma," Amara said, bowing slightly. Madame Kemi touched the fabric. "The stitching is clean. The design is simple but elegant. You have skill, young woman." "What's your name?" "My name is Amara, Ma." Madame Kemi nodded thoughtfully. "Amara, do you want to continue struggling here, or do you want to learn how to grow?" Amara looked at her, surprised. "Ma, I want to grow, but I don't have money." Madame Kemi smiled. "Money is not the first thing you need. What you need is vision. Come to my fashion house tomorrow morning. I want to see what you can really do." Amara's hands trembled. "Ma, are you serious?" Madame Kemi nodded. Double quotes, "Yes. Life gives second chances to those who refuse to give up. Don't waste this one." As the car drove away, Amara stood frozen, tears filling her eyes, but this time, they were tears of hope. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Madame Kemi's words in her mind, "Life gives second chances to those who refuse to give up." The next morning, Amara dressed carefully in her cleanest outfit. She tied her scarf neatly, took her measuring tape, and walked to Madame Kemi's fashion house with her heart full of courage. The building was grand, air-conditioned rooms, shiny sewing machines, and designers bustling everywhere. Amara felt small at first, but Madame Kemi smiled warmly and said, "Don't be afraid. Great people start from small corners." From that day on, Amara's new journey began. She worked with passion, learned everything quickly, and soon became one of Madame Kemi's most trusted designers. Little did she know that this meeting, this simple act of kindness, was the beginning of her transformation from the woman who was mocked to the woman the whole city would one day admire. Because, My children, the stone that the builder rejects often becomes the cornerstone of greatness. My children, when the rain of grace begins to fall, even the dry ground will bloom again. That was how Amara's new life began to take shape under the guidance of Madame Kemi. At first, it wasn't easy. The other designers at the fashion house looked at her with suspicion. Some whispered behind her back, saying, "This village tailor won't last here," but Amara ignored them. She had faced humiliation before, and she knew that silence was stronger than anger. Each morning, she arrived earlier than everyone else, sweeping the floor, threading needles, and practicing her stitching until her fingers hurt. Madame Kemi watched silently, impressed by her dedication. One day, Madame Kemi called her into the office. "Amara," she said, "you remind me of myself when I started. Hungry to learn. Never complaining." "I like that. Thank you, Ma," Amara said shyly. Madame Kemi smiled. "From now on, you will assist me with my private clients. I want them to see what you can do." That day, Amara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Soon, her work began to speak for her. Wealthy women who once looked down on her now admired her designs. Her dresses appeared at weddings, birthdays, and high society events. Whenever people asked who made them, Madame Kemi proudly said, "That's my girl, Amara. But, my children, success does not come without tests." One afternoon, a woman walked into the fashion house asking for a custom gown. When Amara looked up, her heart skipped. It was Chin, Emma's new wife. Chin didn't recognize her at first. She handed over her design sketch and said rudely, "I want this gown ready in 1 week. And make sure it's perfect. I'm attending a big business dinner." Amara smiled gently. "Yes, Ma. You'll get the best." For 7 days, Amara worked with precision and care. When Chin returned to pick up the gown, she gasped in surprise. The dress was stunning, elegant, flawless, and exactly as she imagined. "Who made this?" Chin asked. Madame Kemi pointed at Amara. "She did." Chin's jaw dropped. "You?" Amara met her eyes and said softly, "Yes, Ma. I always give my best, no matter who it's for." For a moment, Chin didn't know what to say. She quickly paid and left, but her pride had been shaken. That night, as Amara closed the shop, Madame Kemi said, "You handled that with grace. Never fight small battles, my dear. Let your work do the talking." And indeed, Amara's work began to speak so loudly that her name reached far beyond Anugu. Newspapers called her the woman who turns fabric into magic. My children, when the moon rises, even the darkest night must bow. So it was with Amara. Her light had begun to shine, though many who once mocked her had not yet realized it. Months passed, and her fame continued to spread. Amara became Madame Kemi's right hand at designing gowns for governors' wives, celebrities, and businesswomen. Her gentle nature, combined with her exceptional skill, made her beloved by all. One bright morning, as Amara arranged fabrics in the showroom, a delivery man walked in holding a golden envelope. "Good morning, Ma," he said. "This letter is for Miss Amara Okafor." "For me?" she asked in surprise, taking the envelope. The paper was thick and perfumed, sealed with a wax stamp shaped like a heart. She opened it carefully and read the words inside. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Emma and Chin." Her hands trembled. The words blurred before her eyes. Emma. Her ex-husband. The man who had thrown her away like old cloth. He was getting married again to the same woman who once mocked her in the market. At first, she laughed bitterly. "Why would they invite me?" she murmured. But then she noticed a note at the bottom of the card. "It would mean a lot if you could come, Emma." Amara's eyes hardened. "Mean a lot?" She remembered his cruel laughter, his words, "You are nothing." Madame Kemi, who had been watching from her office doorway, came closer. "What's that, my dear?" Amara handed her the invitation silently. Madame Kemi read it, frowned, and then looked at Amara. "So, that's the man who hurt you?" Amara nodded quietly. Madame Kemi's eyes softened. "Do you want to go?" Amara looked down. "I don't know, Ma. Why should I? Maybe they only want to laugh at me again. Madame Kemi placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. My child, sometimes the best revenge is not anger, it's transformation. Don't go to fight. Go to show them what they lost. Amara looked up slowly. Show them what they lost. Yes, Madame Kemi said firmly. You are no longer the broken woman they remember. You are a queen now. And queens do not hide from those who once shamed them. That night, Amara stood before her mirror. The reflection staring back was no longer the timid woman who had once begged to be loved. Her eyes were calm, her posture strong, her skin glowing. She whispered to herself, let them see the new me. The next morning, Madame Kemi smiled proudly and said, leave the dress to me. I'll design something worthy of your story. Days later, a gown arrived shimmering silver, with hand-stitched beads that caught the light like stars. It was breathtaking. Amara touched it gently, tears welling in her eyes. This is more than a dress, she said softly. It's my armor. And so, with her heart steady and her head high, she prepared to walk into the very place where she had once been broken, not as the poor tailor they mocked, but as a woman reborn. Because, my children, when destiny decides to turn around, even your enemies will send you an invitation to witness your own glory. My children, when the tortoise plans a feast, he never knows the yam he will meet, sweet or sour. That was how Emma's big day began. The wedding of Emma and Chin was the talk of the whole city. Banners hung across the streets, cars lined the church compound, and guests arrived in glittering clothes. Musicians played drums, and laughter filled the air. Emma stood tall at the entrance, wearing a fine white suit and dark shades. He smiled proudly, shaking hands and greeting his guests. Chinma, in her diamond-studded gown, posed for photos, her beauty shimmering like polished glass. Today, Emma whispered to her, the whole of Anugu will see that I made the right choice. Chin smiled. And if your ex-wife shows her face, she will know what she missed. They both laughed. But my children, the gods of destiny love surprises. Hours later, just as the ceremony was about to begin, a hush fell over the crowd outside. Heads turned. The sound of car tires on gravel filled the air. Slowly, a long black Rolls-Royce glided into the compound. Its silver rim sparkled under the sun, and when the door opened, all eyes widened. It was Amara. She stepped out gracefully, dressed in Madame Kemi's silver gown, the one that shimmered like moonlight. Her skin glowed, her hair fell neatly around her shoulders, and her diamond earrings caught the sun's reflection. Every step she took was like music. Guests gasped, is that Amara, Emma's ex-wife? No, it can't be. Look at her, she's glowing like a queen. Even Chin's smile froze, her confidence fading. Emma's jaw dropped. He blinked, unable to speak. Amara walked past him without a word. She didn't look angry, nor proud, just peaceful, like a woman who had found herself. Inside the hall, whispers followed her like a song. Men stared in awe. Women whispered, she's the designer everyone's talking about, Amara of Madame Kemi's house. When the officiating pastor called for guests to sit, Amara took a quiet seat near the front. Chin couldn't stop glancing her way. Her joy began to fade like the evening sun. During the reception, Emma tried to approach her. Amara, I didn't expect you to come. Amara smiled politely. You invited me, remember? I didn't want to disappoint you. He forced a laugh. You look different. Successful. Yes, she replied softly. Pain can polish a person more than gold ever could. Her words cut deep. Emma lowered his gaze, feeling a sting of regret he couldn't explain. As the music played and people danced, Chin's eyes burned with envy. Emma's attention had drifted, and no matter how she smiled, he couldn't stop glancing at the woman he once threw away. When Amara finally stood to leave, the crowd parted for her. Even the photographers turned their cameras toward her, the ex-wife who had outshined the bride. Outside, she looked up at the sky and whispered, thank you, God. I needed closure, not revenge. She entered her Rolls-Royce and drove away quietly, leaving whispers, oh, and lessons behind. Because, my children, true beauty is not in the clothes you wear, but in the strength that rises from your scars. And that day, Amara became living proof that dignity never dies, it only transforms. My children, when a man throws away good soup because it lacks pepper, he may later eat sand when hunger comes. That was the story of Emma after his grand wedding. At first, the marriage between Emma and Chin looked like heaven's blessing. Their pictures filled social media. Chin flaunted her rings, Emma smiled proudly beside her, and people hailed them as the perfect couple. But like a masquerade that dances beautifully in daylight, the truth was waiting to show its face in the dark. The first few weeks were sweet. Chin cooked fancy meals, wore expensive perfume, and showered Emma with affection. But soon, the real Chin began to show a proud, demanding, and sharp-tongued. "Emma," she said one morning, tossing her hair, "why is there no generator fuel? I can't live like this." "Do you expect me to sweat like a common woman?" Emma sighed. "I've been busy at work." "I'll handle it today." "Busy?" Chin snapped. "You said you were a big man. Yet your friends' wives drive new cars every month. When will you buy me mine?" Emma frowned but kept quiet. He remembered how Amara never asked for such things. She was content even when they shared a single plate of food. He pushed the thought away, but it clung to him like a shadow. Days turned into weeks, and the arguments grew louder. Chin began to go out without telling him where she was going. When he complained, she laughed. "Stop acting like a village man, Emma. I didn't marry you to be my jailer." Emma's heart began to twist with regret. Every night, when silence filled the house, he saw Amara's face in his mind, her calm eyes, her gentle hands, her soft words. He remembered the nights she waited up for him, the prayers she whispered for his success. And now, she was the one shining, while he felt empty beside a woman who only cared for fame and money. One afternoon, as he scrolled through his phone, he saw a photo that froze his heart. It was Amara, standing beside Madam Kemi, both smiling at a business event in Lagos. The caption read, "The unstoppable duo behind Nigeria's fastest-growing fashion empire, House of Kemi and Amara." Emma's hand trembled. His mouth went dry. He couldn't believe it. Amara, the same woman he once mocked, was now a star. People in the comments praised her grace, her humility, her talent. For the first time in his life, Emma felt true shame. He dropped the phone and buried his face in his palms. That evening, Chin returned home late, smelling of perfume he didn't recognize. "Where are you coming from?" he asked quietly. She rolled her eyes. "I don't owe you an explanation." Emma looked at her and saw only emptiness. The love he thought he wanted was now poison. And the woman he threw away was now a queen in her own right. That night, he couldn't sleep. His pride had crumbled, his peace was gone, and his heart was haunted by one question that would never leave him. Why did I let her go? Because, my children, when a man mocks a woman of virtue, the gods of destiny write his foolishness in bold letters for the world to read. My children, when the sun finally shines after a heavy storm, the earth drinks deeply and blossoms again. That was how Amara's life began to bloom after her long season of tears. Under the wise eyes of Madam Kemi, Amara became a new woman. Every morning, she arrived early at House of Kemi Boutique, sweeping floors, ironing fabrics, and learning how to talk to wealthy clients with grace. But Madam Kemi saw beyond her humility. She began to teach her the real secrets of success: how to dream, how to plan, and how to walk like a woman who knows her worth. "Amara," Madam Kemi would say, "any woman who can stitch torn fabric can also stitch a broken life. It's not the clothes you sew that matter, it's the name you build." Amara listened like a hungry student, her pen always moving, her eyes always bright. She learned how to choose the best fabrics, how to price her designs, how to treat customers with dignity, and how to make every dress tell a story. Within months, she became Madam Kemi's right hand. Soon, big women from Abuja and Lagos started asking for that quiet tailor from Anugu. Her designs carried elegance with simplicity, gowns that spoke of strength and grace. One customer, the wife of a senator, was so impressed that she invited Amara to design for an entire charity event. That event changed everything. Amara's dresses appeared in newspapers, and her name spread like sweet perfume. Orders started flooding in from banks, from politicians, even from abroad. Madame Kemi, proud like a mother, called her one evening and said, "Amara, it's time. You are ready to fly on your own." Tears filled Amara's eyes. "But madam, I can't leave you. You made me who I am." Madame Kemi smiled softly. "No, my daughter. I only watered the seed. The strength was already in you." And so, with trembling hands and a heart full of gratitude, Amara opened her own fashion house, Amara Royal Couture. The grand opening was attended by important guests, media houses, and influential women. Cameras flashed, lights glowed, and Amara stood tall in a gold gown she designed herself. She spoke humbly at the microphone. "I once thought my life was over. But pain was my teacher, and grace was my friend. To every woman who has been called nothing, rise, because your story is not finished." The crowd clapped thunderously, some even with tears in their eyes. Madame Kemi watched proudly from the front row, whispering, "You have become the woman you were born to be." From that day, Amara's name carried power. Her designs graced fashion runways, her face appeared in magazines, and her story inspired thousands of women. She became known not just as a tailor, but as a symbol of strength, resilience, and rebirth. Yes, my children, the same woman who was once mocked as a village tailor now walked among queens and presidents' wives. But she never forgot where she came from or the pain that shaped her. Because a woman who rises with humility will always shine with grace. My children, the road of life is full of strange turns. The same tongue that mocked you yesterday may one day call your name with trembling respect. That was how fate turned her drum toward Amara once again. By now, Amara Royal Couture had become a household name. She had branches in Abuja, Lagos, and even Accra. Her designs were worn by first ladies, actresses, and business moguls. She owned a mansion in Anugu, with marble floors that gleamed like water and chandeliers that sparkled like stars. Her once simple face now carried confidence, her every step graceful like a queen's. Yet through it all, Amara remained humble. Every Sunday, she still attended church quietly, sitting in the same pew where she once cried for God's mercy. Her heart was grateful, not proud. But destiny, my children, always finds a way to complete its circle. One sunny afternoon, Amara sat in her office, a spacious room with glass walls, awards shining behind her desk. Her secretary, a young woman named Ifeoma, walked in holding a white envelope. "Madam," she said, "a courier just delivered this. It's addressed personally to you." Amara looked up from her laptop. "Who is it from?" Ifeoma hesitated. "It says, from Mr. Emma Okafor." The name struck Amara's heart like thunder on a quiet night. Emma. The man who once threw her away like old cloth. Slowly, she reached for the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a gold-trimmed card that read, "Invitation to the grand wedding anniversary celebration, Mr. and Mrs. Emma and Chinwe Okafor, venue Royal Heritage Hotel, Anugu, date, Saturday, 7 p.m. You are specially invited." Amara stared at the card in silence. The handwriting was proud, the tone arrogant. Beneath it, a short handwritten note caught her attention. "I hope you'll attend, Amara. I would love to show you what real success looks like." Her lips curved slightly, not in anger, not in sadness, but in quiet amusement. The man who once mocked her in the market now wanted to show off his success. He didn't know that life had turned the table long ago. Ifeoma looked curious. "Madam, who is it from? Should I throw it away?" Amara smiled faintly and shook her head. "No, my dear. Keep it safe. I will attend." That night, as she sat on her balcony, the cool wind brushing her face, Amara thought of all she had endured, the insults, the heartbreak, the shame. And now, she was being invited back into the very world that once rejected her. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Lord, give me grace. I don't go to prove them wrong. I go to show them what you have done." The next few days were filled with whispers among her staff. Everyone was curious about the mysterious invitation. Amara said nothing. She simply called her personal stylist and said calmly, "I need a gown, one that speaks royalty, but still carries grace." The stylist nodded. "What color, madam?" Amara smiled gently. "Gold. Let it shine like the woman who rose from dust. Because, my children, sometimes silence is the loudest revenge, and elegance the sharpest weapon." The night of the event was drawing near. The city of Anugu buzzed with excitement, and destiny, like a patient drummer, waited to beat its final rhythm. My children, there are moments in life when the heavens pause to watch the story of one soul unfold, moments when destiny walks through the door and even pride trembles. That was the night Amara stepped into the grand ballroom of the Royal Heritage Hotel. The celebration had already begun. Laughter echoed through the marble halls, and the air was thick with perfume and pride. Glittering chandeliers hung above, and men in sleek suits mingled with women dressed in diamonds. At the center of it all stood Emma, looking smug in his designer tuxedo, his arm wrapped around Chin, the woman he had chosen over Amara. Emma's face was painted with self-importance. He laughed loudly, boasting to his friends about his new businesses, his cars, his house. "Tonight," he said proudly, "the high and mighty will see how far I've come. I even sent an invitation to my ex-wife. I want her to see what she missed." His friends laughed, raising their glasses. None of them knew the storm that was quietly approaching. At exactly 8 p.m., the grand doors at the far end of the hall swung open, and silence fell like rain. Every head turned. Amara stood there. She was breathtaking. Her gold gown shimmered like sunlight on water, hugging her graceful frame. A delicate crown rested on her braided hair, and her steps were slow, elegant, and confident. Behind her, two assistants carried her flowing train that sparkled with crystals. Her makeup was soft yet commanding, her face glowing with quiet power. For a moment, even the music stopped. Cameras clicked, murmurs filled the hall. "Who is that woman?" someone whispered. "She looks like royalty," another replied. But the older guests knew. And slowly, one by one, people began to realize. "That's Amara, Emma's ex-wife." Emma's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. His heart raced as he stared at the woman he once humiliated, the same woman now walking toward him like a queen returning to her throne. Chin's smile faded instantly. She tugged on Emma's sleeve, whispering sharply, "Is that her, the tailor?" Emma swallowed hard, unable to speak. His mind screamed in disbelief. "Tailor? No, billionaire fashion mogul." Amara's heels clicked softly on the marble as she approached the center of the hall. Every eye followed her. The host, flustered but smiling, quickly handed her the microphone. She smiled calmly and said, "Good evening, everyone. I came because I received an invitation from an old friend. I didn't know it was to such a grand celebration." Her voice was gentle but carried strength. Her tone had no bitterness, only grace. The crowd applauded softly, impressed by her composure. Amara turned slightly toward Emma, who still stood frozen beside Chin. Her eyes met his, not with hate, but with calm forgiveness. She said softly, "Congratulations, Emma. May your marriage bring you the peace you once denied others." Then she smiled, that smile that once melted his heart, and gracefully handed the microphone back. As she turned to walk away, people swarmed around her, praising her elegance, asking for photos, begging to know her designer, unaware that the designer was her. Emma watched helplessly as photographers surrounded the woman he once called worthless. Chin's jealousy burned like fire, her face tight with anger. At that moment, Emma finally realized the truth. He had lost a diamond while chasing glitter. Because, my children, the most powerful revenge is not in words or anger, it is in success, dignity, and peace. My children, when truth walks into a room, lies run to hide. That night at Royal Heritage Hotel, Amara's entrance was like lightning striking in the middle of a dry season. Even hours after she walked in, people still could not stop talking. Every corner of the hall buzzed with whispers. Women adjusted their gowns and men cleared their throats, pretending to stay calm while their eyes followed Amara's every move. Her presence commanded attention, not because of pride, but because grace had finally found its voice. "Do you know who that is?" one woman whispered, clutching her wine glass. "I heard she's the owner of Amara Royal Couture, the one who designs for the governor's wife," another replied. "No, you don't mean that Amara. Wasn't she Emma's ex-wife?" "Yes, so. The same woman he divorced and humiliated." "God is really alive." The whispers spread like wildfire, faster than the waiters could refill drinks. Every guest, from the politicians to the socialites, turned to look at Emma, whose smile had vanished completely. He stood stiffly beside Chen, pretending not to care, but his eyes kept darting toward Amara, who was now surrounded by journalists and business elites. Chen's jealousy grew like poison in her veins. "Emma, why is everyone talking about her?" she hissed. "Isn't this our night? Why are they taking pictures of that woman instead of me?" Emma forced a fake smile. "Ignore her," he muttered. But even his voice trembled. He could feel eyes burning holes in his back. A man from the business community walked up to him with a smirk. "Emma, you didn't tell us your ex-wife is the Amara Royal." "My wife wears her designs all the time." "She's a billionaire now, isn't she?" Emma's throat went dry. "The billionaire," he stammered. The man laughed heartily. "Of course. Everyone knows her. She even designed the vice president's wife's dress for the state banquet." "My friend, you must have great taste to have married such a woman once." Emma smiled weakly, his pride collapsing piece by piece. He excused himself and walked toward the back of the hall, his hands shaking slightly. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. How could the woman he once called nobody now be everybody? Meanwhile, Amara sat at a reserved table surrounded by dignitaries. She laughed softly, her voice musical, her confidence calm. Each time she smiled, camera flashes followed like lightning after thunder. Madame Kemi, her former mentor, had come as her guest and sat beside her. "You see, my daughter," she whispered, "God doesn't shame those who keep their hearts pure. You didn't fight back with anger, you rose with dignity." "And the world saw." Amara smiled. "It's not me, Mama, it's grace." Across the hall, Shin sat stiffly, her fake smile cracking like old paint. She watched as Amara became the center of admiration, the very thing she always craved. The irony was heavy. The woman she once mocked as a poor tailor was now the one every powerful person wanted to know. Later that night, as the band played slow music, people began approaching Amara with business proposals, collaborations, and praise. Emma watched helplessly, realizing the bitter truth: he had traded gold for dust. When he finally gathered the courage to walk toward her, the crowd around her parted slightly. Their eyes met again, 1,000 memories rushing between them. "Amara," he said quietly, his voice low, almost pleading, "can we talk privately?" She looked at him for a moment, her face unreadable. Then, with gentle firmness, she replied, "Some conversations belong to the past, Emma. And I've moved forward." The words struck him like cold wind. She turned gracefully and walked away, her gown flowing like light. And in that moment, everyone in the hall learned a truth as old as time: when a good woman rises, even her silence speaks louder than thunder. My children, when a man mocks grace, he digs a pit that he himself will fall into. After the night of the anniversary, Emma's world began to crack, not with thunder, but with quiet shame that ate at his heart like fire in dry grass. The next morning, newspapers and blogs were filled with headlines: "Ex-wife of Emma Okafor stuns crowd at anniversary gala, billionaire designer Amara Royal steals the night." Pictures of Amara in her golden gown flooded social media. The story spread like wildfire across Anugu and beyond. Everywhere Emma went, people whispered, "Isn't that the man who left Amara? He must be regretting now. Imagine throwing away such a woman." God truly fights for his own. At first, Emma tried to act strong. He told himself that money was still on his side, that fame still followed him. But inside, his pride had shattered into dust. Every photo of Amara's smile, Every headline that praised her success stabbed his chest like a blade. At home, peace was gone. Chin was no longer sweet or loving. Her voice became sharp, her words full of bitterness. "So, you didn't tell me your ex-wife is a billionaire," she snapped one evening. Emma sighed deeply. "Chin-o, please, don't please me. Do you know how embarrassed I was last night? Everyone was looking at her. They didn't even notice me." Emma rubbed his temples, but Chin continued. "I married you because I thought you were my ticket to a better life, but it seems she was the real gold mine." Those words hit him like thunder. "She married me for wealth, not love." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. He sat alone on the balcony, staring into the dark city lights, replaying every memory of Amara, her patience, her laughter, the way she used to wait for him with food even when he came home late. He remembered how he mocked her, called her village tailor, and threw her things out into the rain. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time in years, Emma wept, not out of anger, but regret. "I had gold in my hands," he whispered, "and I traded it for gravel." The following days were worse. Business began to falter. Clients pulled out of deals. Rumors spread that Emma's wealth was borrowed and that his company was sinking. The same friends who once laughed with him now avoided his calls. In desperation, he tried reaching out to Amara. He sent messages, left flowers, and even showed up at her office one morning. But her secretary politely told him, "Madam is unavailable. She wishes you well." That was when he realized Amara wasn't ignoring him out of hatred. She simply had no space for him in her new life. Days turned into weeks, and Emma's regret deepened. Chin grew colder, their home turned silent, and every reflection he saw in the mirror looked like a stranger. He began visiting the same church where Amara once prayed, sitting quietly at the back pew, hoping she might walk in one day. Each time he saw her on billboards or TV, his heart ached with longing not for her beauty or success, but for the peace she carried. "Yes, my children," the proud man who once laughed at love was now begging life for mercy. But life had already moved on, wearing gold and smiling gently, just like Amara. Because sometimes, the loudest punishment for foolishness is not pain, it's watching the person you hurt rise beyond your reach. My children, there comes a time when the past knocks again. Not to stay, but to see how far you have grown beyond it. That was the season when Amara and Emma's paths crossed once more. Months had passed since the night of Emma's humiliation. Amara's name continued to soar across Africa. She had opened a foundation called the Amara Hope Initiative, created to empower widows and young women who had been abandoned or abused. The foundation sponsored girls through school, trained women in tailoring, and built shelters for single mothers. One evening, she received an invitation to the National Charity Gala, a grand event organized to celebrate Nigeria's most impactful philanthropists. The theme was Rising from Pain to Purpose. Amara smiled when she saw the theme. It felt like her life in one sentence. She accepted the invitation without hesitation. The night of the gala arrived. The hall was filled with powerful figures, governors, CEOs, and celebrities. Cameras flashed, the red carpet shimmered, and Amara, in a stunning emerald gown, walked in like royalty. Her presence drew admiration, but this time she was not there to impress, she was there to inspire. She was seated beside prominent business leaders when the host announced the next guest speaker. "Please welcome Mr. Emma Okafor, Managing Director of Royal Holdings." The hall clapped politely, but Emma's heart skipped for a moment. "Emma," he walked onto the stage, looking thinner, his face older, his pride visibly gone. He began to speak, his voice steady but humble. "Tonight, I want to talk about second chances," he said. "There was a time I had everything: wealth, friends, and pride. But I lost it all because I didn't value what truly mattered. I hurt someone who deserved my respect, and I live every day wishing I could undo it." The crowd grew silent. Cameras zoomed in. Some turned toward Amara, realizing who he was referring to. Emma continued, his eyes moist. "To that person, if she's listening, I want to say, I'm sorry. You taught me the true meaning of grace, even without words. And for that, I thank you." Amara's chest tightened. She sat still, her eyes glistening. The room erupted in applause, but she didn't clap. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, releasing the last trace of pain. After his speech, Emma stepped off the stage. He walked toward the audience, and their eyes met again. But this time, there was no bitterness between them, no pride, no anger. Only understanding. He approached slowly, bowing slightly. "Amara," he said softly, "thank you for forgiving me even when I didn't deserve it." Amara looked at him gently. "Emma, I forgave you long ago. Not for you, but for me. I needed peace, and forgiveness gave me wings." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "You've become everything I once dreamed of and more." She smiled kindly. "No, Emma. I became what I was meant to be, the woman God designed from the start." At that moment, cameras flashed, capturing the two standing side by side, not as enemies, not as lovers, but as two souls finally free from the past. Later that night, Amara gave her own speech. She said, "Pain may break you, but it also molds you. If you stay faithful, what once hurt you will one day inspire others." The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Even Emma joined in, clapping with genuine admiration. That night, peace finally settled like dew after a storm. Emma left with humility, Amara left with grace, and destiny, smiling quietly, closed its circle. "My children, when a seed refuses to die, it becomes a tree that gives shade to others." Such was the story of Amara, the woman who rose from disgrace to grace, from pain to purpose. Months after the charity gala, Amara's foundation grew beyond anything she could have imagined. The Amara Hope Initiative expanded across Africa, empowering thousands of women. Schools bore her name, and her success story was told in classrooms and churches alike. Everywhere she went, women called her the Queen of Grace, not because she wore gold, but because she carried herself with dignity and forgiveness. One sunny afternoon, Amara sat in her Lagos office, signing documents for a new training center in Anugu, of the same city where her story began. Her assistant entered, smiling. "Ma, there's a group of young girls here to see you. They say you changed their lives." Amara nodded. "Let them in." 5 girls entered, their eyes bright with gratitude. One of them stepped forward shyly. "Madam Amara," she said softly, "we came to thank you. Before your program, we had nothing. But now, we can sew, feed our families, and dream again." Tears filled Amara's eyes. She stood, hugged the girl gently, and said, "Never forget, it's not about where you start, but where your courage takes you." That evening, Amara returned to her mansion, not the one built on pride like Emma's, but one built on peace and purpose. She walked to her balcony overlooking the city lights, the wind brushing against her face. Her thoughts wandered back to the tailor shop, the market humiliation, the tears on her sister's shoulder. She smiled. It was all worth it. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma. "Thank you again, Amara. Because of you, I've changed. I now mentor young men about respect and humility. You were the lesson I never deserved, but needed." Amara looked up at the stars. "God," she whispered, "you turned my ashes into beauty." She remembered her mother's old saying, "A woman's strength is not in how loud she shouts, but how gracefully she rises after the fall." The next weekend, she traveled to Anugu to inaugurate her new training center. The whole community gathered, drummers played, women danced, and even children sang songs of hope. When it was time for her speech, Amara stood tall, her voice calm and powerful. "Years ago, I was mocked in this same city. I was called poor, useless, and ordinary. But I stand before you today as proof that no insult can stop destiny. If life breaks you, rebuild yourself stronger. If they laugh at you, let your success answer for you." The crowd cheered wildly, tears and smiles blending in one glorious moment. Her sister Chinyere, standing in the front row, couldn't stop crying. "You did it, Amara," she whispered. You became everything he said you'd never be. Amara turned and smiled. No, my sister. We did it. Every woman who ever cried, every heart that ever broke, we all rose together. As the drums played and the women danced around her, the wind carried her laughter across the city, not the laughter of revenge, but of redemption. From that day, her name became a symbol of strength across Africa, Amara, the Queen of Grace. And so, my children, remember this: when the world calls you nothing, let your story prove them wrong. When life breaks you, rise again with grace. For true power is not in revenge, but in forgiveness, in rebuilding, and in walking with your head high when others expect you to bow. Amara's journey had ended, but her legacy had just begun. The end.
Subscribe for more content.